Motion also applies to motions number 2 to 20. Motion numéro 1.
Motion number 1. May I dispense? Yes? If a member participating in person wishes that the Honourable Member for Kingston and the Islands, I would ask for a recorded vote.
Pursuant to Standing Order 45, the division stands deferred until Monday, June 17, 2024, at the expiry of the time provided for oral questions. Le vote par appel. Oh, no, okay. Statements by members. Déclaration de députés. L'honorable député de...
The Honourable Member for Yukon.
Every day since October 7th, I have heard from Yukoners by letter, phone, on the street and in person, horrified and deeply concerned about the humanitarian tragedy in Gaza. My constituents are calling for a ceasefire, for humanitarian aid to flow, for humanitarian law to be respected, for targeting of hospitals and medical facilities to stop, for the bombing of civilians to stop, and for the adversaries to come to the table once and for all. We must see the hostages released, and we cannot let an entire population starve. Madam Speaker, while all eyes are on Gaza, we know that terrible atrocities are also occurring around the world at this time, in Sudan, in Haiti, and in too many places to name. In the Yukon, we have kept hard conversations civil and respectful. The rest of Canada should take note. The tensions we are living must not escalate into the anti-Semitic and Islamophobic attacks we are seeing. As parliamentarians, we would do well to bring people together and closer, and not use fear and discrimination to drive people apart. The urgency for peace has never been greater. Madam Speaker, let us all do our part.
The Honourable Member for Yorkton Melville.
Today I stand to congratulate a young man in my riding of Yorkton Melville. Jake Soltis, a grade 11 student from Sturgis Composite School, wrote a Remembrance Day poem that pays homage to our fallen heroes, entitled A Tribute to the Brave. Jake's poem won at the local, zone, district, and provincial levels. He then went on to receive first place on the national level, winning a prize and a trip to Ottawa for this year's National Remembrance Day service. A portion of his poem reads, "In Flanders fields the poppies grow to remind us of the debts we owe. On Remembrance Day we stand as one to remember those whose battles are done." I am so proud to represent Canadians who remember these sacrifices for our freedoms that were so valiantly defended and fought for. And I am extremely proud of our young community of members like Jake who honor that legacy. Congratulations, Jake. I'm sure your trip to Ottawa Remembrance Day 2024 will be memorable, lest we forget.
The Honourable Member for Halifax West.
I'm proud as the sponsor of the Lebanese Heritage Month Act to recognize the first anniversary of the adoption at all stages of this bill into law with unanimous consent today. What a delight it was to hoist the Lebanese flag on Parliament Hill last November for the very first time. The pride in the adoption of this law is felt in communities across the country. Speaker, this is a challenging time for Lebanon and for the Lebanese people, who overwhelmingly are united in their desire for peace, stability, and the opportunity to further their own prosperity. Canada is marking 70 years of diplomatic relations with Lebanon, and I will continue to support those Lebanese Canadians using their voices to urge for the preservation of their homeland sovereignty. I'm looking forward to our second flag raising on the Hill in November and to the celebrations that will be organized throughout the country. Until then, I wish everyone a safe and happy summer. Thank you.
Honourable Member for North Island Powell River.
As a part of acknowledging the 100-year anniversary of the Royal Canadian Air Force, amazing people in my riding are working hard to celebrate by building a beautiful full-size display case for the de Havilland Vampire Mark III. The aircraft is stored at the base away from public sight to protect it from the weather. We want it outside, safe in a pavilion with the outdoor museum of other military planes. Year-round, people tour it and learn more about how our service members served in the past. During the winter holidays, the planes get decked out in lights. The folks have aimed for $1 million to get the display case built. We have gotten 50% of the way there, and I'm so proud. I hope this government looks at ways to contribute to help to keep this history. I want to thank everyone leading this fundraising project, especially the folks at the Comox Air Force Museum, 19 Wing Honorary Colonel Robert Quartermain for matching donations from the public up to $50,000, which was successfully done. And thank you to Dave Mellon, who always keeps me updated.
The Honourable Member for Windsor-Tecumseh.
Madam Speaker, today I rise in the House to celebrate the 49th Annual Carousel of the Nations Festival in my community of Windsor, Essex. Over the next 2 weekends, our community will showcase our incredible diversity and pride at being a welcoming community. 30 villages, from Greek to German, Croatian to Caribbean, Italian, Lebanese, Polish, Filipino, and more, will open the doors to share their heritage, dancing, beautiful cultural dress, and of course, delicious food. In a world divided by difference, the Carousel of the Nations celebrates our differences as our strength, what unites us, and what makes our country so vibrant and so beautiful. I am proud our federal government has been a strong partner for Carousel of the Nations, providing over $500,000 to the festival over the last 8 years. I want to thank Fred Francis and the amazing team at the Multicultural Council, all the volunteers and vendors, for the incredible dedication to a remarkable festival. Save me a honey bowl and some slivovica, and I'll see you at the carousel. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Calgary Centre.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Last week, we honoured Canadians who had made spectacular contributions to Canada's cultural life with the Governor-General's Performing Arts Awards. Among the honorees was Calgary's own Jenny Belsberg, winner of the Raymond John Natition Award for Volunteerism in the Performing Arts. Created in 1992 by the late Governor-General, along with his wife, Gerda Natition, this award is given yearly to a Canadian whose work and accomplishments enrich Canada's cultural life. Ms. Belsberg has been a lifetime of impact on the arts in Alberta. She helped found the Lieutenant Governors of Alberta's Arts Awards Foundation in 2003. This foundation has overseen more than $1.5 million awarded to 100 Alberta artists. The performing arts thrive due to the major dedication of volunteers, and it is thanks to people like Jenny Belsberg that arts projects can succeed in our communities. We are all richer for that. Join me in bidding a warm congratulations to Jenny Belsberg on receiving.
The Honourable Member for Labrador.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise today to discuss the significant investments we are making in housing across Canada, particularly in northern regions like Labrador. Recently announced over $10 million for 33 new homes in the community of Sheshatshiu. I continue to work with their chief and band council to address their ever-pressing housing needs. Over the last decade, we've invested more than $100 million in housing in the Nunatsiavut region in the northern part of my riding, resulting in new homes and triplexes in communities like Nain and Hopedale for those that were housing insecure. We've also added 20 new units for women fleeing violence and for low-income families in Happy Valley Goose Bay. And in Labrador West, we have upgraded more than 20 new units under Newfoundland and Labrador housing and constructed additional units. While the Conservatives slashed housing budgets and did not respond to the needs of families and continue to vote down our investments, we continue to work hard to keep their...
The Honourable Member for Hamilton Mountain.
J'ai eu le grand honneur de voyager en Normandie pour commémorer.
Last week, I had the great honor of traveling to Normandy with the Canada-France Association to commemorate the 80th anniversary of D-Day. It was a very moving experience to be there with a dozen veterans who had lived through the horror of D-Day, who were instrumental in the liberation of Europe and in our freedoms today.
Connections in Normandy for D-Day. Major General Richard Romer, Honorary Lieutenant General of the Canadian Armed Forces, born in Hamilton, he flew a Mustang in the Second World War, and his reconnaissance led the Allies to find and injure Nazi General Erwin Rommel. Also, a team of engineering students from McMaster University who built a special torch for the occasion. They brought a bit of the Centennial Flame from Ottawa across the ocean and used it to brighten various ceremonies throughout the week. And in a new remembrance room at the Juno Beach Centre, I saw a beautiful tribute to Hamilton's own Nathan Cirillo, who was killed in 2014 in Ottawa while on sentry duty at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. Speaker, we will remember them. Nous nous souviendrons d'eux.
Lest we forget.
L'honorable député de Mégantic.
The Honourable Member for Mégantic-l'Érable. Madam Speaker, on July 6, 2013, at 1:14 a.m., in the middle of the night, a runaway train derailed right in the heart of the small town of Lac-Mégantic. 47 people lost their lives. 2,000 people had to be relocated. This tragedy will never be forgotten. At the time, I was mayor of a municipality not far from the tragedy. I remember the grief expressed by the families of the victims. I remember the outpouring of solidarity in the wake of the tragic accident. Today, I feel compelled to talk about all of this because the community of Lac-Mégantic is still waiting for the solution recommended by the governments of Quebec and Canada, that is, the construction of a bypass route. Canadians may not know this, but almost 11 years after the tragedy, just over 6 years after a joint announcement by the Premier of Quebec and the Prime Minister of Canada that the bypass would be ready in 2022, construction has not yet begun. I implore the Liberal government, Transport Canada, the Canadian Transportation Agency, and all decision makers to remember July 6, 2013, and to remember the 47 people who died. The people of Lac-Mégantic, Nantes, and Frontenac want answers and action. Words are no longer enough.
The Honourable Member for Surrey Centre.
Madam Speaker, Surrey is home to high-level athletes from across the country. Last month, 26-year-old Benit Biesla was crowned as the Canadian light heavyweight champion in a first-round knockout, making it his first professional title. Turning pro in 2019, Biesla has amassed a record of 10 wins and now the undisputed #1 ranked fighter in Canada for the light heavyweight category. Biesla was also the first Sikh Punjabi fighter to fight at the Madison Square Garden in 2023 against a top-ranked American in his class. I've seen this kid work tirelessly at his dad's gym, Biesla Martial Arts in Surrey, to win fight after fight. Benit Biesla serves as a role model to young Canadians across the country who hope to pursue their dreams of fighting professionally one day. Congratulations, Benit Biesla. Way to go.
The Honourable Member for Portage Lisgar.
This NDP Liberal government is at it again, Madam Speaker. Their job-killing economic vandalism knows no bounds. They are sabotaging our economy by taxing farmers during a food crisis. Sylvain Charlebois, Canada's food professor, said, and I quote, "To suggest that this change only affects a minimal amount of Canadians is, I think, misleading. I think it actually affects a lot of businesses, including the agri-food sector. And I would start with farmers." And he's right. They are jacking up taxes on farm families by 30% to pay for their out-of-control spending. By targeting farmers' retirement plans, he is jeopardizing the transfer of the operation to the next generation. And for what? To pretend he's Robin Hood and that farmers are the villains? In reality, he's the Sheriff of Nottingham, roaming around the countryside to pillage what is left of people's bank accounts. He's undermining Canadian values and diminishing the rewards of a life of hard work that it deserves. It's time to bring home the Canada we remember, the Canada we recognize, and the Canada we need.
Honourable Member for Oshawa.
Madam Speaker, over 2 years ago, the Liberal MP for Whitby committed candor. He accidentally told Canadians the truth that the radical Liberal net zero plan would intentionally cause Canadians pain. Now Canadians know what the Liberals have been hiding all along. For weeks now, the Liberals have been refusing to provide their secret report on the cost of the carbon tax to Canadian families. This is a desperate and malicious attempt to hide their own data, which show that Canadians are worse off under this disastrous inflationary carbon tax. This carbon tax pain, Madam Speaker, will cost nearly $2,000 per household in lost GDP, a $30.5 billion hit to our economy. For years now, the radical environmental minister has told Canadians that the carbon tax was making them richer, while the exact opposite was true. And they knew it all along. When will this radical environment minister resign and the government release its secret carbon tax report?
That's right. Hear, hear. The Honourable Member for Mississauga, Erin Mills.
Madam Speaker, on Monday, Mississauga voters went to the polls across the city to elect a mayor, and I want to congratulate my dear friend Carolyn Parrish, the new mayor-elect of Mississauga, on her victory. Mississauga is a city of a vibrant mosaic of people from different religions, ethnicities, languages, and experiences who had their say on the priorities that matter most to them, like housing, the cost of living, transportation, and safety in our community. They exercised their vote for an experienced leader with a proven track record serving Mississauga at multiple levels of government and who has dedicated her career to the city that I call home. I want to congratulate and thank all candidates who put their name forward, including sitting councillors Alvin Tejo, Deepika Damerla, Stephen Dasco, who ran respectable campaigns, articulated their vision for Mississauga, and took part in the democratic process. Congratulations, Carolyn. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for London Fanshawe.
In 1985, the City of London welcomed the Caja family, political refugees from Guatemala. It wasn't easy. They had to learn a new language while facing racism and discrimination. But they persevered and for the past 40 years created an incredible space in London through the universal language of music. This year is the 30th anniversary of Sunfest, a free music festival that brings together music from across Canada and the world to London. We will also be celebrating Alfredo Caja's appointment to the Order of Canada for his contributions to Canadian music and culture. From July 4th to 7th, Londoners will come together in Victoria Park to celebrate our diversity and our designation as Canada's first UNESCO City of Music. We will have almost 50 artists performing everything from Afro-Latin punk to hip-hop to Spanish folk music. Thank you to Alfredo, Patty, Alfie, and Mercedes for everything you have given to our city, and I hope all Canadians take a moment to reflect on the rich diversity that makes Canada better.
The Honourable Member for Abitibi, Bay James, Nunavut, EU. Madam Speaker, I'd like to tell you about a local man from my riding full of courage and determination. His name is Stéphane Racicot. For several years, Stéphane has been involved in the Abitibi music scene as a DJ and as an event organizer. In August 2022, following a fall into his hotel room, he became quadriplegic. His rehabilitation took 9 months. Unsurprisingly, music accompanied him throughout his remission. On June 8th, Stéphane was back on stage for the first time since his accident as a DJ at the 5th Val d'Or Pride event. Thanks to new technology, Stéphane can be a DJ by controlling everything with his eyes. Stéphane has been very involved with Fierté Val d'Or as a coordinator, organizer, and member of the board of directors. In 2023, at the Rayon C Gala, he was honored for his participation. He received the Volunteer of the Year award for his involvement with Fierté Val d'Or Pride, as well as his involvement with Frima and the Prospecteur shows. I'm delighted to welcome Stéphane back, and I wish him all the best for the future.
For Northumberland, Peterborough Centre.
The Ministry of Truth has assured Canadians that they are better off because of the carbon tax. It costs them nothing. In fact, they're getting richer because of it. But a few weeks ago, we learned from the Parliamentary Budget Officer that the government has a secret report on the carbon tax. And after seeing some of the government's data, we understand why they're trying to hide it. The government's own data shows that the carbon tax costs every Canadian household nearly $2,000, and that Canadians are losing about $30 billion in economic activity because of the carbon tax. Canadians are exhausted by this government's doublespeak. They know what we know, that the carbon tax costs Canadians billions of dollars. Why does this Prime Minister continue to stand by his radical Environment Minister instead of standing up for Canadians?
Yeah. The Honourable Member for Longueuil-Charlemagne.
Madame la Présidente,
Madam Speaker, as we prepare to celebrate Father's Day this Sunday, I would like to take this opportunity to acknowledge and thank all the fathers, grandfathers, and great-grandfathers in my riding of Longueuil-Charlemagne and across the country.
Father's Day is an opportunity for us to all express our appreciation to the incredible dads and father figures in our lives, those who offer guidance, support, and love in immeasurable ways. As I get older, I reflect on all the countless ways my father always put my brothers and me first, from volunteering for my Girl Guide troop to showing me how to put a worm on a hook, to making the best campfires and letting me hang out at the fire station. While I was running for the nomination as candidate 10 years ago, my dad was undergoing treatment for throat cancer, yet he still ran around collecting support for me. Dad, I don't get to spend as much time with you as I wish I could, but know that you'll always be my hero. To the dads in my life, my father Dave, my father-in-law Gary, my husband Chris, my son Patrick, and any day now, Madam Speaker, my son Jonathan, happy Father's Day. Je vous aime.
I love you.
Oral questions, questions orales, honorable député.
The Honourable Member for Mégantic-L'Érable.
Madame la Présidente, un employé.
Madam Speaker, an employee who deliberately hides facts from his employer that costs the company thousands of dollars would be fired immediately. So what are we to make of an environment minister who hid from Canadians the real cost of his carbon tax, $30 billion? That's nearly $2,000 per family per year. And now he wants to muzzle the Parliamentary Budget Officer and hide the truth from Canadians. When will he be fired? The Honourable Minister of the Environment. Madam Speaker, We will not be lectured here on this side of the House by people who can't even do basic math. This is the party that a few weeks ago, they're not talking about it anymore, but they were saying that if we gave people a break on gas tax, Albertans would save, for example, $1,000. It didn't add up. So let's try with astronomy instead of math. To save $1,000 by scrapping the gas tax this summer, you could go 10% of the distance from Earth to the moon. The minister is out to lunch, Madam Speaker. Don't talk about the moon. Now, what we learned from the report was the true cost of the carbon tax, the true cost to Quebecers. It says Quebecers will spend $5 billion a year in economic damage because of the carbon tax. The worst thing is that the Liberal bloc wants to collect even more by radically increasing the tax on gas and diesel. Mr. Speaker, the minister hid the truth and Quebecers are paying the price. When will he resign? The Honourable Minister. Madam Speaker, it's so ridiculous. The PBO confirmed that 8 families out of 10 are getting more than they pay into the carbon tax. They're getting more back. And, of course, there are costs to every measure we take, but the Conservatives never talk about the benefits, the billions in investments right now, not in 2030, but the millions, the 23, without talking about the $23 billion rather, that we will be spared in averted disasters so with the climate. So if anyone should resign, it's members opposite. The Honourable Member for Mégantic-L'Érable. Madam Speaker, the Liberals have refused to include a clause in their bill, their job-killing tax bill, that would guarantee that 99% of Canadians will be spared the carbon tax, the Liberal bloc's tax hike to capital gains. We wanted to protect plumbers, carpenters, small business, and seniors. When will the Liberal bloc stop picking the pockets of the middle class to pay for this oversized government? The Honourable Minister. Well, the member gave us quite a word salad there. What Quebecers know, what they understand, is that tax fairness is what matters. And what we're doing is sparing all those who have a paycheck that will not affect you. People who earn in 1 year over $250,000 in capital gains will have to pay a little bit more.
After 9 years of this NDP Liberal government, the truth is out about their punishing carbon tax. A partial government report leaked by the Liberals to the marketing arm of the Liberal Party of Canada, the CBC, revealed that when factoring for inflation, the Liberal carbon tax will leave a $30 billion hole in our economic activity. The carbon tax will cost every Canadian household almost $2,000. The Liberals' activist environment minister tried to silence the parliamentary budget officer from exposing this report. This is unbelievable. The environment minister is not worth the cost. When will he resign?
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Madam Speaker, the member opposite is fighting action against climate change at the very moment that houses in her own community are threatened by wildfires. We are trying to make sure that we save people's homes. We are protecting Canadian communities. She's busy letting the planet burn.
The Honourable Member for Kelowna Lake Country.
Well, Madam Speaker, that's absolutely ridiculous. And the Liberals have been hiding the truth from Canadians. Right at the Finance Committee, the Parliamentary Budget Officer said, quote, "We've been told explicitly not to disclose it and reference it." The Liberals have been trying to muzzle the Parliamentary Budget Officer. And, the government is still holding much of this report from the public. The entire report must be released to expose the economic vandalism of the carbon tax. The Environment Minister is not worth the cost. Will he resign?
The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House.
Madam Speaker, that member sure represents a beautiful part of Canada. The last time I was there, you could almost choke on the forest fire smoke. People in Kelowna, people in the Okanagan expect action on climate change. And they also know that 8 out of 10 of them pay less in price on pollution than they get back in rebates. That is the case across the country where the tax applies. Madam Speaker, we are acting on the environment. We are acting on affordability. The people of the Okanagan support that.
The Honourable Member for Salaberry-sur-Roi. Madam Speaker, let's talk about foreign interference. One leader says it's no big deal. Another says it's very grave. Both want us to take their word for it, and we're no further ahead. The Minister of Public Safety said on Monday that he wouldn't breach secrecy because RCMP Deputy Commissioner Mark Flynn warned him he would face criminal charges. Does the government think that all elected officials who consulted the documents should face the same charges? And does the government think we're any further ahead today with elected officials who are treading a fine line with the law? The Honourable Minister. Madam Speaker, I'd like to thank the Bloc because yesterday we passed a bill at third reading, a very important bill when it comes to foreign interference. And that adds to a long list of solutions and initiatives this government has put in place to combat foreign interference. We know that all countries in the world have to deal with this challenge, and Canada is distinguishing itself with the series of steps we've taken to strengthen our institutions and to counter foreign interference. The Honourable Member for Salaberry-sur-Roi. Madam Speaker, there are two opposing versions. The Pollyanna, move along, nothing to see here, and the alarmist, call 911. We don't know if one or both are telling the truth. We don't know if one or both have given in to the lure of the spotlight. This accomplishes nothing except to build mistrust. And now, thanks to them, when the HoC Commission tables its report, there's a risk that one of the two camps, the Pollyannas or the alarmists, will question the Commission's findings. Is it too much to ask that elected officials be responsible, abide by the law, and let the judge do her work? The Honourable Minister. Of course, we want to allow Justice Hogg to do her job, and that's why the House leaders have negotiated a very clear and broad mandate for that commission. We greatly appreciate Justice Hogg's work. And meanwhile, I don't know whether the Bloc leader has stepped forward to consult these documents, which are confidential. The NDP leader did, the Green leader did.
Member for Edmonton Strathcona.
Madam Speaker, in Edmonton, it's becoming increasingly hard to find an affordable place to live. Rents are up 20% since last year, and there simply isn't enough affordable housing. The Conservatives think building luxury condos will fix the problem, which is another example of them wanting to give money to their rich friends. But Canadian families need a home, and the Liberals aren't acting with the urgency necessary to build below-market, co-op, and supportive housing. When will this government get serious about affordable housing so that people in Edmonton can find a place to live? Thank you.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
I wish the member would have attended this week's meeting at the House of Commons committee that's responsible for housing, Mr. Speaker. And Albertan Tim Richter from the Canadian Alliance to End Homelessness made clear that this housing vision put forward by the government is the most ambitious in 40 years, and it's substantive. It's justified. There is proof points in everything we put forward, including co-op housing that she mentions. In fact, just a few days ago, the largest investment we've seen for co-op housing in the past 30 years. She talks about supportive housing. We've supplemented that in the most recent budget. In her community, she's seen support. 71,000 people lifted off.
The Honourable Member for Victoria.
Madam Speaker, as Canadians choke on smoke and flee from wildfires, Canada's biggest banks are handing out even more money to oil and gas companies. Under the Liberals, Canadian banks have become some of the biggest financiers of fossil fuels in the world. And the Conservatives are happy to let these banks put profits over our planet. Canadians are struggling with the cost of living and the climate emergency, while the banks fuel both of these crises to get even richer. So why are the Liberals letting big banks off the hook?
That's right. Honourable Minister of Environment and Climate Change.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I thank my honourable colleague for her question, and I would agree with her. We think that banks should be doing more when it comes to fighting climate change and putting money where their mouth is, which is why the Office of the Superintendent for Financial Institutions is putting in place measures to ensure that banks and other financial institutions disclose their climate risks, and we've also committed and put in place measures to ensure that we put in place in Canada a taxonomy principle so that we ensure that investments that are made that are green will be green, Madam Speaker. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Calgary, Rocky Ridge.
Madam Speaker, the Liberals promised to be the most open and transparent government in history and said data paid for by Canadians belongs to Canadians. Well, that promise is just a sick joke after 9 years of secrecy and cover-ups. Yesterday, Common Sense Conservatives forced the NDP Liberal government to release some of the data that they had been suppressing, which proves that the carbon tax costs every Canadian family nearly $2,000. The Environment Minister has misled Canadians. When will he resign?
The Honourable Minister of Environment and Climate Change.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I think that the people who should resign are the people who have hundreds of times voted against providing Canadians with clean air, clean water, protecting the environment. Not tens of times, hundreds of times, Madam Speaker. If anyone should resign in this House, it is these people. 8 out of 10 Canadians are better off because of carbon pricing where the federal program applies. We're helping Canadians. We're fighting climate change. They're doing none of that.
The member for Calgary, Rocky Ridge.
Well, Madam Speaker, this government only does the right thing when they get caught. They only disclose this information because Conservatives forced them to. This NDP government put a gag order on the Parliamentary Budget Officer because they didn't want Canadians to know the economic cost of the carbon tax. Per capita GDP is falling. The carbon tax makes life more expensive, proving that this Prime Minister is not worth the cost. The Environment Minister has misled Canadians by hiding the truth. When will he resign?
Yes. Honourable Minister of Innovation.
I think we've answered that question many times. The sloppy Conservatives, we know where they're going. They're against climate change. They've resigned on acting on behalf of Canadians. They've resigned on taking the best side of the Canadians. They've resigned on future generation, Madam Speaker. Think about that. They will not stand up to fight for our kids and our grandkids. Climate change is the issue of our time, Madam Speaker, and they've resigned from this issue. So it's laughable to hear them speak about resigning. 8 of 10 Canadians will be better off, Madam Speaker. We're going to fight for Canadians at every step of the way, and Canadians know that, and they see the games that the Conservatives are playing this morning.
Honourable Member for Sturgeon River Parkland.
Well, Madam Speaker, let's test that hypothesis and call an election right now. After months of fighting this NDP Liberal government just to get the facts, we finally got some of the documents. The government's own analysis on the carbon tax shows that Canadians will lose nearly $30 billion, costing families $1,800 each year. Clearly, Canadians are not better off with this job-killing carbon tax. Everyone is paying more and getting less. This Liberal government is not worth the cost. The minister needs to take responsibility for hiding this information from Canadians. When will the Prime Minister be demanding his resignation?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Madam Speaker, if the member opposite actually cares about the next generation, as we're looking into Father's Day, let's think about that. We're talking about taking responsibility today for our actions to make sure that we're passing over a healthy planet to our next generations. 8 out of 10 Canadians get more back from the climate rebate than they do pay in any kind of carbon pricing, but more importantly, we're making sure that we're protecting the planet for our children.
Honourable Member for Sturgeon River Parkland.
Well, Madam Speaker, if that was true, why is this NDP Liberal government working so hard to cover up the documents that prove them wrong? It was only Common Sense Conservatives who forced this NDP Liberal government to reveal the truth, and the Liberals tried to discredit our own budget watchdog. But it was revealed that they were hiding the true cost of their carbon tax with secret documents and gag orders. These Liberals can run, but they can't hide from the true cost of their inflationary carbon tax. Canadians will lose nearly $30 billion a year. That's $1,800 for each Canadian family. The minister needs to face the consequences for this cover-up. When will the Prime Minister demand his resignation?
The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House.
Madam Speaker, this This environment minister is the first environment minister in history to put forward a credible plan to meet our 2050 net zero objectives and our Paris commitments. That member, you know what he should do? You know what they preferred, which would have remained secret? His premier, who scoured the universe, looked on the internet, got out his calculator, did all of that analysis that Scott Moe does, and said, you know what? The price on pollution is the cheapest way to go about fighting climate change and putting money in people's...
The honourable member for Regina Wascana.
Madam Speaker, after 9 years of this Liberal NDP government, this Prime Minister is not worth the cost or the cover-ups. The Environment Minister has been saying all along that the carbon tax wouldn't cost us any money, or that it would even make money. But now we know the economy will lose $30.5 billion per year, or $1,800 per family, because of the carbon tax. Madam Speaker, when will the Environment Minister resign?
Good question.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Clear, Madam Speaker, that question's been answered numerous times, but it's no surprise that Conservatives don't want to talk about their embarrassing vote against tax fairness. Well, Conservatives believe if you're flipping burgers, you should pay more tax than if you're flipping stocks or houses. With our plan, we're standing up for tax fairness. And let's just be clear, if you don't profit over $250,000 from an investment or the sale of an asset in a single year, you won't pay a cent more. If you make your hard-earned money on a paycheck, you won't pay a cent more. The Conservatives think hardworking Canadians pay tax on
Honourable member for Regina Wascana.
Madam Speaker, when the Parliamentary Budget Officer asked the Minister's Department to provide its internal economic analysis of the carbon tax, the response included the following sentence: I request you to ensure that this information is used for your office's internal purposes only and is not published or further distributed. This is the gag order that the extremist Environment Minister placed on the Parliamentary Budget Officer, and this is why the Environment Minister must resign.
That's right.
When will he do it?
That's
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Speaker, it's clear the Conservatives don't care about the future of the planet. They don't care about tax fairness. They don't care about investments that Canadians need and rely on. They believe that if you're flipping burgers, you should pay more tax than if you're flipping homes or flipping stocks to make a living. You know, under our plan for tax fairness, if you don't profit over $250,000 from an investment or the sale of a property, you won't pay a cent more. If you make your hard-earned income on a paycheck, you won't pay a cent more. That's 99.87% of the population that won't pay a cent more. We think that the wealthiest should...
The Honourable Member for Repentigny. Yesterday at committee, the representatives of Canada's 5 big banks appeared: BMO, Scotiabank, CIBC, Royal Bank, and TD. They all rank in the top third of global oil and gas financiers. But it's hard to get an accurate picture of their investments because the other 3 parties in this place refuse to require them to disclose those investments. They all voted against the Bloc's amendment to C-69, which would have required mandatory disclosure of bank investments in fossil fuels. Why won't the government force the banks to be honest with the public about their oil agenda? The Honourable Minister of the Environment. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd like to thank my colleague for her question. She should know that the Office of the Superintendent of Financial Institutions monitors all of this, and companies do disclose their investments in fossil fuels and the risk to the climate, and so that's already being done. The Honourable Member for Repentigny. I'd like to know whether that's optional or not. But anyway, these 3 parties are willfully blind to the financing of fossil fuels. Last year alone, the big 5 Canadian banks invested $142 billion. Scotiabank's CEO spoke for all 5 of them when he said, we have to abandon emissions reductions at all costs. Bankers and oil companies share the same rhetoric and the same goal: to get rich off pollution. We want to force the banks to disclose their dirty oil assets. The other 3 parties want them to invest in secrecy. Why? The Honourable Minister. with all due respect, I have to correct the member because it's not optional. It's a requirement with HoC that's imposed on all financial institutions, not just the big banks. The entire financial industry has a requirement to disclose to the superintendent of financial institutions. So that is, we have a duty and we're fulfilling it.
$1 billion, Madam Speaker. That's the true cost to Canadian families from the Liberal NDP carbon tax that the Environment Minister tried so desperately to cover up. $1,800 cost to every household. It's no wonder the Environment Minister did his best to gag the Parliamentary Budget Officer and cover up the true cost of the carbon tax. Instead of sending a memo to the PBO demanding his silence, why doesn't the Environment Minister instead send a memo to the PMO with his resignation?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Madam Speaker, that the Conservatives do not care about the future of our planet. They will not stand up for our children and our grandchildren. On this side of the House, we're advancing tax fairness for Canadians with our new capital gains regime. That means that if you're earning your paycheck or your hard-earned income on a paycheck, you won't pay a penny more. Unless you're earning over $250,000 a year from the sale of an asset or other, you're going to pay more. You won't pay more. And Conservatives believe if you're flipping burgers, you should pay more tax than if you're flipping stocks or homes.
Honourable Member for Edmonton West.
The Liberal response to questions on more taxes is talking points adding more taxes. The Minister of the Environment interfered with the work of the Independent Parliamentary Budget Officer. He stood repeatedly in this House and misled Canadians that they would be better off financially with the carbon tax, all the while covering up the fact that the Liberal NDP carbon tax will cost Canadians more than $30 billion a year. Instead of working to increase the economic vandalism of the carbon tax, why doesn't the Environment Minister just do Canadians a favor and resign?
The Honourable Minister of Innovation.
Madam Speaker, what Canadians are seeing this morning, those who are here and at home, Conservatives just don't care, Madam Speaker. That's the bottom of all the questions we've heard this morning. Canadians understand that what we did in the last budget was about generational fairness, Madam Speaker. That is the core issue that Canadians want us to address. That's why, Madam Speaker, we may change the capital gain taxes, Madam Speaker, because we want to invest in the next generation. We want to invest in workers. We want to invest in seniors. We want to invest in our future. But here you go again. The Conservative voted against that fairness, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Calgary-Shepherd.
The NDP Liberal government misled Canadians by claiming they'd be better off with the carbon tax scam. Turns out that the Environment Minister's own carbon tax data shows that it will cost families nearly $2,000 more after the higher costs on groceries, home heating, and gas. That's $30 billion in economic vandalism per year. Now, Conservatives have forced the release of all the carbon tax cover-up documents. So, will the radical Environment Minister finally climb down from his tower and resign?
The Honourable Minister of Labour.
Let me repeat the numbers because the numbers bear repeating. $1,800 a year for a family of four in Alberta, $1,200 a year in Manitoba, $1,120 in Ontario, $1,504 in Saskatchewan, $760 a year in New Brunswick, $824 a year in Nova Scotia, $880 a year in PEI, and $1,192 for a family of four in Newfoundland and Labrador. That is cold, hard cash, and they would know that if they bothered to check their own bank accounts. Thank you very much, Madam.
The Honourable Member for Chatham-Kent-Leamington.
How many times have the Liberals falsely stated, even today, that 8 out of 10 Canadians get more back than they pay? I guess they figure if they say something often enough, people will start to believe it. But Canadians know because their pocketbooks tell them so. Conservatives have forced the end of the carbon tax cover-up, and now the Public Budget Watchdog's report confirms that Canadian families pay nearly $2,000 more in carbon tax per year. And they also knew that it cost our economy $30 billion per year in economic activity lost. When will the Environment Minister resign for his...
The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House.
You know, Madam Speaker, Chatham-Kent-Leamington A lot of great farmers in Chatham, Kent, Leamington. It's shameful that the leader of the Conservatives, who's never seen the top of a combine or a hay baler, he hides behind farmers and workers to justify his opposition to our plan on tax fairness. We are increasing the capital gains sheltering for farmers.
I'm going to interrupt the Honourable Leader of the Government. We have order, or the Honourable... or there will be questions taken away. Order! The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House.
From the top? So it's shameful, Mr. Speaker. The leader of the Madam Speaker, the leader of the Conservatives has never been seen on a hay baler. He's opposing our program to give tax fairness to farmers. We are increasing the capital gains sheltering for farmers by boosting the lifetime exception for qualified farming properties to $1.25 million per owner. That member over there should be standing up and celebrating tax fairness for farmers, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Port Moody-Coquitlam.
The federal government's very own Public Service Pension Investment Board partnered up with the rich real estate CEO to invest in 71, 75, and 79 Thorncliffe Park Drive. Now they're hiking rents and evicting people, and the Liberals are letting them get away with it. When the NDP tried to summon that very same CEO to explain themselves, the Liberals and the Conservatives teamed up to block it. Why are the Liberals partnering with rich CEOs to jack up rents and evict people from their homes?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Madam Speaker, the member knows very well, because she put in an order paper question not too long ago, that this matter, and she keeps on raising the company Starlight, did not have any relations with CMHC. So we can take up that matter at committee, but more substantively on the issue of housing. This government is the first in Canadian history to put forward measures to protect renters. In fact, to attach conditionality to infrastructure funding. Provinces want access to infrastructure funding. They have to respond by putting in place protections for renters, Mr. Speaker, whether it's supportive housing, whether it's co-op housing, all these things that the NDP rightly champion. We're behind that vision for the country, Madam Speaker. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Winnipeg Centre.
Madam Speaker, Jordan's principle is supposed to uphold equity in health services for Indigenous children and youth, and yet multiple organizations in Winnipeg Centre are going without funding. Begawin Incorporated is owed almost $600,000, while Spirit Horse is owed almost $400,000, and staff are going without pay. The minister would not work without pay, so why should Indigenous organizations? When will the Liberals uphold Jordan's principle and ensure Indigenous organizations are paid what they owed?
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Can I thank my honourable colleague for that very important question. For generations, First Nations families and people have suffered tremendously through discriminatory and systemically racist child welfare practices. One of the first things we did as a government was to implement Jordan's principle in 2016 to ensure First Nations children can access the care they need when they need it. Last year, we also reached a milestone compensation agreement co-developed with First Nation partners. We're actively working with partners on strategies and best practices to speed up approvals and reduce administrative burdens faced by service providers. I'll work with the member to make sure that this issue is dealt with. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Bonavista, Burren, Trinity.
Madam Speaker, for far too long, successive governments have failed to fund and protect affordable housing across Canada. But our government is changing that. Last week, we made an historic $1.5 billion investment in the new Cooperative Housing Development Program, the largest investment in co-op housing this country has seen in 30 years. Can the Parliamentary Secretary for the Housing, Infrastructure and Communities please share with Canadians how the Co-op Housing Development Program is going to create a new generation of cooperative housing across Canada?
Parliamentary Secretary.
Madam Speaker, as a former mayor, our colleague understands very well the place of co-op housing in communities large and small. 250,000 Canadians live in co-ops, Madam Speaker. It's an affordable option. These are non-profits, of course, that come in various types, large apartments, townhouse complexes. They vary, but they provide a sense of community fundamentally to the people that live there. The Leader of the Opposition insulted those 250,000 Canadians by calling it Soviet-style housing, Madam Speaker. Soviet-style housing. He styles himself as some sort of student of history. He should read his history. He should come up with a housing plan that actually makes sense. They have no vision because they don't care.
A member for South Shore St. Margaret's.
Last night, the Auditor General revealed that the Prime Minister's hand-picked Liberal cronies running the billion-dollar Green Slush Fund gave companies they owned not $76 million that was revealed last week, but actually $319 million of taxpayer money. This is on top of the Auditor General's findings that $59 million was spent on ineligible projects by these Liberal robbers. That's almost $400 million of taxpayer money that these Liberals took to enrich themselves. So when will these Liberals get the money back?
The Honourable Minister.
Madam Speaker, here are the sleepy Conservatives again, Madam Speaker. We have said it time and time again. We investigated what happened at STDC, Madam Speaker. We made sure that the chair and the CEO have resigned. We launched an investigation. We suspended the fund to the organization. We supported the Auditor General report. And now we have provided a new governance mechanisms to make sure, Madam Speaker, that we can support the small and medium-sized business in this country which are fighting climate change. When would the Conservative will get on board and support our actions?
The Honourable Member for South Shore St. Margaret's.
This Liberal minister was sleeping at the switch as he sat idly by for 5 years and did absolutely nothing as Liberals stole $400 million of taxpayer money. It took a Conservative motion in this House passed to send documents for these corrupt Liberals to the RCMP with the vote against from the Liberals. The Liberal hacks broke 2 laws, and their lobbyists, the Minister of Environment, joined the Minister of Industry in the getaway car as they funneled $400 million to themselves. So when will the Liberals demand the return of the $400 million stolen by the Prime Minister's personal
The Honourable Minister of Innovation.
Madam Speaker, I'm happy. I know it's Friday, so let's wake up the Conservatives. They've been sleeping, Madam Speaker. I launched the investigation when they were sleeping, Madam Speaker. They were sleeping. It's Friday, but here we go. We started the investigation. We made sure that people would come back and have a new governance model. We made sure we would support our small and medium-sized business. We know they're against climate change, but now we learned they're against small and medium-sized business, Madam Speaker. Can you imagine that? They're against small and medium-sized businesses. We're going to fight for Canadians at every step of the way, restore governance, and fight climate change.
The Honourable Member for St. Albert, Edmonton.
Madam Speaker, yesterday the Auditor General confirmed that a staggering $400 million taxpayers' dollars improperly went out the door at the Liberals' Green Slush Fund. Board members illegally funneled $319 million into their own companies. Meanwhile, the current and former minister turned a blind eye to corruption on a level that makes the sponsorship scandal look small. So now that the corruption has been exposed, what specific steps is the minister taking to get taxpayers a refund?
Honourable Minister.
Here we go again, Madam Speaker. Another one, just wake up, Madam Speaker, and ask a question about something that we have dealt with, Madam Speaker. Canadians want governance. That's what we did. They want to make sure we get to the bottom of things. That's what we did. They want to make sure we restore funding to small and medium-sized businesses so we can fight climate change together, Madam Speaker. I don't mind the sleepy Conservative asking me questions because you know what? I will always fight for Canadians. I will always fight for small business, and we will fight against climate change, Madam Speaker.
Honorable député de Louis Saint-Laurent.
The Honourable Member for Louis Saint-Laurent. Well, we will not be taking lessons from this minister. He's been sleeping at the switch for 5 years when there was a serious situation going on with Sustainable Development and Technology Canada. And yesterday, we learned that the AG tabled a report that said that these Liberals have been siphoning off money into their own buddies' pockets. When will the minister finally wake up? The Honourable Minister, my friend for Louis Saint-Laurent, is finally waking up in French this time. I know it's Friday, but people seem to be finally waking up. As I said in English, we launched an inquiry Madam Speaker, to ensure we have appropriate governance within this important organization. The chair of the board resigned. We have suspended funding. We have proposed a new kind of governance, and on this side of the House, we will always fight for small and medium businesses. We will fight climate change. And Madam Speaker, we will be supporting our businesses. The Honourable Member for Abitibi-Baie James Nunavik EU. Madam Speaker, all of our regions deserve support in fighting fire. In the supplementary estimates, Ottawa has increased the budget for the Pacific Economic Development Agency to rebuild Lytton in BC, which was destroyed by fires in 2021. We want people in Lytton to be able to rebuild their lives. And last summer, we also had fires in our regions. In Quebec, 4.3 million hectares of forest burned. That's more than the surface area of Switzerland. Will other economic development agencies also receive a similar level of assistance? The Honourable Minister of the Environment. I'd like to thank my colleague for her question. As she probably saw in the budget, we have once again invested additional sums this year in the budget to help us face fire. By the end of the year, we will have trained 1,000 firefighters throughout the country. We are working with our partners in the provinces and territories. We're working with the international community to ensure that we will do as much as possible to face wildfire. And preparing for fire also means fighting climate change, which is something that the Conservatives don't seem to understand. The Honourable Member. Well, my riding, Abitibi-Baie James Nunavik EU, was the riding that was the most affected by these fires, with more than 1 million hectares that went up in smoke. We all remember how courageous people were. They fought to save their municipalities and homes. And so we feel a great deal of empathy for people from Lytton, because we know the horrible things they experienced. We're simply asking for fair treatment here. Will a similar amount be given to the other economic development agencies, given that these regions were also affected by the 2023 fire season? The Honourable Minister of the Environment. Madam Speaker, not only we have invested additional amounts in the budget to increase our capacity to face fire, but also last year we created the first climate change adaptation plan in the history of the country. The first one. We worked with all of the provincial and territorial governments. We're working with municipalities and Indigenous communities. We're bringing in measures to help our communities to better prepare for climate change.
Member for Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands, Rideau Lakes.
In a cabinet of serial lawbreakers, the minister from Edmonton is showing that after 9 years of this NDP Liberal government that this Prime Minister isn't worth the corruption. This is the minister who's been cashing checks from a lobbying firm that's lobbying his own government. And Global News revealed text messages that show a Randy involved in a $500,000 fraud case is at the minister's company. So it's a really simple question, and we haven't been able to get an answer. Maybe the government House leader can tell us today. Why won't they tell us what Randy's last name is?
Honourable Leader of the Government in the House.
Madam Speaker, as this member well knows and has been repeated many times, the minister took an hour to answer the questions coming from, among others, the honourable colleague across. He has lives under the most stringent conflict of interest and ethics guidelines in the world, and he's completely answered all of the questions that have been posed, Madam Speaker.
Member for Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands, Rideau Lakes.
Well, just like the hour we've spent not getting answers from these Liberals, we didn't get any answers from the minister when he was at committee. Just like Conservatives ordered the minister to produce his phone records, and he didn't do that, and now the committee has sent for those same records again. Liberals blocked the summons of the other Randy for coming to committee. Conservatives have now ordered the minister from Edmonton's two business partners to appear at committee in this case of a $500,000 fraud and another Randy. So the question is very simple. We'll see if the government House leader can answer it. Is the other Randy at Sunnyvale having a cheeseburger picnic, or is he in cabinet with this Prime?
Honourable Leader of the Government in the House.
You know, Madam Speaker, in an age of climate change, in an age of ensuring tax fairness, in an age of a number of major issues facing the country that we continue to work on, it is amazing to me every time this minister gets up and asks a question that has been asked dozens of times in this chamber, answered dozens of times in this chamber and in committee, the minister has responded to all of that, Madam Speaker.
Member for Langley, Elder Grove.
After 9 years of these incompetent Liberals, 9 out of 10 middle-class Canadians are paying more in tax despite promises that only the ultra-rich will pay. Well, a lot of Canadians are surprised to hear that they are now part of the ultra-rich, like Karen, a retailer who bought her own commercial strata unit to save for her retirement. But now the Liberals are imposing another capital gain tax on her retirement nest egg. How is this fair to retailers, to entrepreneurs like Karen, who just want to work hard, make a good living, and save for their retirement?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Let's review the Conservatives' record. In 2015, when our government proposed to raise taxes on the 1% and cut it for everyone else, the Conservatives voted against. When our government implemented carbon pricing that put more money in 8 out of 10 families' pockets, ensuring everyone but the wealthiest were better off, the Conservatives voted against. And when our government asked those who profit over $250,000 per year to contribute more, just a little bit more, the Conservative leader and his party votes against. Let's just be honest with Canadians, Mr. Speaker. Fairness is just not a Conservative value.
Member for Coquitlam, Port Coquitlam.
Madam Speaker, supportive housing projects across Canada are critical to people's well-being. They provide people a safe place to live and to access many services. Having a place to call home is also critical for the path to recovery for people struggling with substance use. Investing in supportive housing is therefore key to addressing the overdose crisis. Under a Conservative government, we would see cuts to supportive housing. Can the Minister of Mental Health and Addictions tell the House about investments our government is making in supportive housing?
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, building and supporting low barrier access to housing is at the core of our response to the overdose crisis. For example, we are supporting Northreach Society project in Alberta, where they provide treatment and mental health services to tenants. Or I could add the Neighbourhood Group Community Services Project in Toronto so that they can train tenants in overdose prevention and response services. Madam Speaker, we are investing in projects like this across the country to support the most vulnerable among us. And we are steadfast in that commitment to support housing solutions that respond to the needs.
The Honourable Member for Pitt Meadows, Maple Ridge.
Madam Speaker, after 9 years of this Prime Minister, Canada is going through the worst decline in living standards in 40 years. I recently spoke to a local mortgage broker. He told me that since the budget was announced, a dozen doctors have contacted him about closing their practices and moving to the United States. This is terrible for Canadians, as millions are without a family doctor. Can't this reckless NDP Liberal government recognize that their excessive taxation is driving out healthcare professionals from our country?
Great question.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Well, thank you very much, Speaker. One thing is absolutely clear, is that the Conservatives do not care. They do not care about Canadians. What they want to make sure is that they keep giving tax breaks to the ultra wealthy in this country. At the same time, cut programs for Canadians that Canadians rely on. What is clear today is that the Conservatives will cut the Canadian dental care program that is right now serving 200,000 seniors across this country with oral health care. What they will cut is the farmer care program so a woman doesn't get contraceptive.
Honourable Member for Lanark, Frontenac, Kingston.
Madam Speaker, Health Canada's Priority Review Status Program exists to allow the expedited review of new, potentially life-saving therapies. Qualifying drug submissions are able to seek approval for therapeutic use in advance of other less urgent therapies. Health Canada's posted time frame for this expedited process is a target of 180 calendar days. So, how often is Health Canada meeting this target? And how often has this target been missed in each of the years since the Priority Review Program was established?
Great question. Honourable Minister, Parliamentary Secretary.
Speaker, and I want to thank the member opposite again for asking a really important question. I know he's asked similar questions before. As I said earlier in this House, our focus is to make sure that we do approve medications through Health Canada, but do so in a manner that maintains the safety of medications for Canadians. We cannot afford to ever take shortcuts that could help jeopardize the lives of Canadians. Of course, through the pandemic, we learned a lot of lessons. We are looking at ways to improve the approval process, and we'll continue to work on that.
For Lanark Frontenac Kingston.
The Housing Minister this time, Madam Speaker. Carleton Place in my riding has been Canada's fastest growing municipality for the past 4 years. So when the town was given $0 from the Housing Accelerator Fund, I wondered why. It turns out there's a pattern here. Of the $1.5 billion awarded to Ontario under the fund, 97% went to cities and towns in which Liberals hold seats. Now, there are some non-Liberal seats in those cities and towns, but even when this is taken into account, there is a clear pattern. Liberal-held areas receive several times as much funding per capita as areas held by MPs from other parties. Why is this so?
Great question.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
179 agreements signed by this federal government to incent zoning changes at the municipal level that will lead to more missing middle housing. That includes row houses, mid-rise apartments, Madam Speaker, fourplexes that they're scared of for some reason. They're against that entire vision. Triplexes, duplexes. This is the vision that this government's put forward, to see more homes built, in particular for young people so they can have a future. That includes in communities large and small. In fact, just recently I had meetings with mayors from southwestern Ontario rural communities who are excited about the $400 million top-up to the Housing Accelerator Fund that member and that party oppose.
The Honourable Member for Yukon.
Madam Speaker, nature is core to Canada's national identity. From our oceans to the St. Elias Mountains to the St. Lawrence River, Canadians take pride in the beauty of our nature, which is also the foundation of our shared well-being and economy. I'm proud that Canada is remaining a competitive world leader as the global community transitions to a nature-positive net zero economy. Our government launched the largest nature conservation campaign in Canadian history and funded the establishment of 3 new national parks in this year's budget. Can the Minister of Environment and Climate Change provide this House with an update on our nature agenda?
The Honourable Minister of Environment and Climate Change.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I thank my honourable colleague for his question. In fact, yesterday we took a major step towards launching Canada's 2030 Nature Strategy and introducing the Nature Accountability Bill in this House, Madam Speaker. Canada is the second country in the world to do so. That bill will hold our government and future governments accountable to make progress on our ambitious nature protection goal. The bill and the strategy provides a coordinated approach to halt and reverse biodiversity loss and help protect nature for future generations and ensure we reach our goal of protecting at least 30% of our lands, waters, and ice by 2030. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Nanaimo, Lady Smith.
Madam Speaker, rent in Nanaimo has been increasing at record rates, up more than 8% from just last year. The Liberals are failing to deliver the affordable homes families need. Meanwhile, the Conservatives want to leave housing up to luxury condo developers who are jacking up prices. Neither option will bring down housing costs in Nanaimo, Ladysmith, and across Canada. Why have the Liberals spent 9 years following in the footsteps of the corporate Conservatives by putting rich developers first? That's right.
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
What builders in her community and throughout the country, Madam Speaker, require are incentives. And we've put forward incentives that lead to more building, in particular for apartments, lifting the GST on the construction of rental apartments for the middle class that the Conservatives oppose, Madam Speaker. When it comes to more home building, I just spoke about the Housing Accelerator Fund. We take a nonpartisan approach to that issue. In communities large and small, represented by various members of Parliament, we're seeing more building, or we will see more building by zoning changes that incent the kind of building that we need for young people in particular, more missing middle options from duplexes to fourplexes to mid-rise apartments and so on. We have more to do, and we will.
And that is it for oral questions today. Alors, les affaires courantes.
Routine proceedings. The Honourable Government House Leader rising on a point of order. Yes, a point of order, Madam Speaker. We were not able to reach an agreement regarding 78.1 or 78.2 of the standing orders regarding third reading and report stage of C-69, an act for some measures contained in the budget tabled in Parliament April 16, 2024. Under 78.3, Standing Order 78.3, I give notice that at the next sitting of the House, a minister will give notice that there will be a designated number of hours and days for this matter. I have two more to present, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, it was not possible to reach agreement under Standing Order